Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. My program has a great sponsor, Americans for Prosperity, and you can go to securebordersecureamerica.com to find out more about that. But Akash Chougule is joining me every day this week to just try and bring you up to speed on the campaign. Good morning, Akash. Thank you for getting up early again. I really appreciate it, people who get here for the first hour of the program.
Anything for you, Hugh. Good to be back with you.
Thank you much. I want to start, and this is going to be a shock to people who drive into work into Akash. The Republican National Committee's research arm went and dug up a old video during the 2019 campaign of then candidate Senator Harris talking about what she believes about taxes. I want to play that for you, Akash. Cut number 17.
So these are some of the ways, but we've got to increase the corporate tax rate. We also have to increase taxes for the top 1%. And that part of that is going to be about repealing that tax bill that they just passed. And also
okay, Akash, AFP is nonpartisan. It's a 501c3, but it does have very pronounced positions on taxes. What do you make of the vice president's proposals there?
Absolutely absurd, frankly, Hugh. I mean, she was obviously playing to her left flank. She was in a primary against Bernie Sanders, and they were all moving to the left with increasingly ridiculous promises to Democratic voters. But what that promise means is a tax hike for more than 80% of American families in this country. It means returning the corporate tax rate to higher than socialist countries in South America, higher than communist China. And that's especially when you start adding in state corporate tax rates, right? We talked about California yesterday. With corporate tax rates like that, you're pushing 50%. She talks about the top individual tax rate, right? A lot of small businesses, as we talked about, they pass through and pay on the individual side. And so that also means a tax hike on small businesses. And ultimately, the thing that's important to remember with the corporate tax, this is very simple. This is agreed upon by economists on the left and the right. The burden of the corporate tax is partially paid for in the form of workers' wages, which means when you raise the corporate tax rate, you are pushing for lower wages for workers, higher prices for consumers, and lower returns for shareholders.
Now, Akash Chougule, I want to stay on the corporate rate for a second. And I want my audience who is driving to work to understand it's about their lives because capital is mobile. I put this on X yesterday, and I try to post basic economics. When I say capital is mobile, what do you hear, Akash? What do you hear me telling people?
What I hear you telling people is that money that would be invested to start and grow businesses and create jobs can leave the country. Just like money can move from California to Texas, money can move from America to Asia or from America to Europe. One of the facts that I saw recently, Hugh, this is an astounding fact. Folks might be familiar with what are called corporate inversions, which sounds wonky, but it basically means you go from being an American company to functionally being a foreign company. You move abroad so that you're not faced with the American corporate tax rate. That was a fairly common occurrence prior to the TCJA. Since the Trump tax bill passed, there have been zero corporate inversions in the United States. Not a single company has gone through a corporate inversion since we cut the corporate tax rate. If we get rid of this 21% corporate tax rate and we raise it back up, we're going to go right back to the old system of, like you said, capital flowing out of the country instead of being invested here to create jobs and grow wages.
I wish I had known that, and I hope you post that over at AFP somewhere, because let's break it down. We got to remember we have Steelers fans listening, Akash, so we have to talk very slowly about corporate inversion. What does that mean, and why does it happen under Kamala Harris's tax proposal?
Absolutely. A corporate inversion is when a company functionally ceases to be an American company and sets itself up abroad in order to avoid the American tax code. When we cut the corporate tax rate, it made it much less beneficial to do that because our corporate tax rate is now much, much more competitive among other developed countries in the world. When Kamala Harris pledges to repeal the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, she will take the 21% corporate tax rate and bump it back up to 35%, which is among the highest, would be among the highest rates in the world. You're going to again see corporate inversions come back, and you're going to see American companies start essentially fleeing the American tax code. Since the Trump tax bill passed, there have been zero corporate inversions of American companies. That is an astounding fact that, in
Yeah, it
addition to the
is.
job wage growth,
That's
speaks
astonishing
to the
because
power
it
of
was
government.
such a problem. We had all these, we had these American companies with profits stranded overseas. And I remember very well the trillions of dollars of American profits that were stranded overseas. No one wanted to repatriate the money. Their company was still in the United States. They'd take their company to their money rather than bring their money back to the United States. That stopped. And now Harris wants to come back. I want to focus on the last part of what she says. Again, I'm going to replay the Kamala Harris flashback from when she was a candidate, speaking full-throated. Kamala, San Francisco Democrat Harris speak, cut number 17.
So these are some of the ways, but we've got to increase the corporate tax rate. We also have to increase taxes for the top 1%. And that part of that is going to be about repealing that tax bill that they just passed. And also looking at estate taxes are going to have to go up.
Estate taxes are going to have to go up. Now, I hate estate taxes because it's double taxation. It really is inequitable, but it also deeply distorts the will. Again, capital is mobile. People leave California because of the California tax structure. They go other places in the United States, whether it's Florida or Virginia or a low tax state in between. Virginia, bumps up against 5.5% income tax, but no estate tax. You go to places with estate tax, nobody wants to die there. And I mean, she wants to absolutely cripple the United States with the federal estate tax again. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. This is another one that folks who are still working or on the younger side might not be familiar with, and it's particularly harmful to American family-owned farms. We've heard a lot of concerns about the ag sector in this country, right? China buying up farmland, how expensive it is to farm in this country. No one wants to do it. When you pass down, say, a family-owned business or a family farm to the next generation, that estate tax creates a penalty that many simply do not have the cash flow in order to be able to pay. And so what they end up doing is, instead of passing it down to the next generation, they simply end up selling it. And who do they sell it to? They sell it to the bigs. They sell it to the big agribusinesses. They'll sell it to Goldman Sachs. If we want to keep family farms functioning in this country, we can't be slapping them with 20, 30, 40, 50% estate taxes, which is what the Democrats want to do. Again, when you take federal policy and state policy and you combine it. And again, folks will frame all of these things as fairness issues, right? Quote unquote wealthy business people or corporate executives or business owners on the family side. Ultimately, the people who are hurt by this are American workers and American consumers. When you raise taxes on businesses, whether it's the corporate tax rate, whether it's the pass-through deduction that hits small businesses, it's the estate tax that hits farms, every single thing like that we do, that Kamala Harris wants to do, means three things. Again, let me repeat this, Hugh. When we raise taxes on businesses, we are doing three things. We're hurting workers' wages, we're raising consumer costs, and we're resulting in lower returns for shareholders. And here's the rub, Hugh. None of these tax hikes combined would come even close to paying for the promises that Kamala Harris and the Democrats have made. So it's nothing to do with funding programs for people to rely on. It's simply about confiscating and redistributing wealth, what the Democrats want to do.
A last question, Akash. The Fed meets tomorrow. Yesterday, the United States crossed the $35 trillion debt mark. That means the United States owes people $35 trillion. I don't know that Americans understand what that means, and I want to give you the last minute here to try and explain to them what a $35 trillion debt means.
Yeah, the debt is basically the sum of all the money that we owe, right? A surplus is we've brought in more money than we spend, and the debt is that we have spent far more than we are able to. And I'll give folks a really simple data point that kind of puts that into perspective. We pay interest on our debt, right? We owe $1 trillion to China and to Japan and all these other countries, and we have different ways of monetizing debt. The interest alone that we pay on the debt recently exceeded the amount that we spend on national defense and the amount that we spend on Medicare. Those are two of the most popular things that the federal government does. We are now spending more simply to borrow money than we are spending on national defense and Medicare. That is very obviously unsustainable. Debt drag will hurt our economy, it'll hurt economic growth, and ultimately we are going to be faced with cuts to entitlement programs, cuts to other programs people rely on, or massive debilitating tax hikes if we do not get our federal budget in order. And next year, this fiscal cliff, the debt ceiling debate, government funding debates, the reconciliation debate with the tax bill, this is a major opportunity to finally get spending in line and do something about the spending that has caused this inflation crisis.
It is absolutely the most important reason our economic well-being and our national security requires a vote for Trump, Vance, Kamala Harris. What a nightmare. Akash Chougule of Americans for Prosperity. We look forward to talking to you again tomorrow. We're rolling out the economic explanation of the next 100 days early and often here on the Hugh Hewitt Show.